Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and in today's video we will be talking about the political ideologies which we have been discussing in my past two videos. So we will move forward and we'll continue with the video. This is the part 3 of an introduction to political ideologies, and before we move forward it is important to know what political ideology is. So as we discussed before as well, so political ideology is basically a philosophical system. It is a system of belief, values and ideas that govern the relationship between the state and the citizenry and how the affairs of government would run in a state. So the first political ideology that we'll be talking about today is theocracy, and theocracy means rule by religious law. And in theocracy, we see that religion and politics are intertwined. In a theocratic system, the state is governed by religious leaders or by religious principles. This means that the legal system is based on religious law, and the leaders of the country are often seen as representatives of a divine power. And when we move forward, we talk about the characteristics of theocracy. But before that, it is important to understand it in a much deeper term. So theocracy in completely simple words means religious rule plus divine authority. And talking about the key features of theocracy, we get to know that it encompasses religious leadership, which means that religious leaders often hold the highest authority and their decisions are based on religious texts and beliefs. Secondly, theocracy is actually governed by religious law. So the legal framework is typically based on religious law such as Sharia law in Islamic theocracies or canon law in the Vatican. And limited freedom of expression is observed in theocratic governments, in which we see that the political freedoms are limited, particularly when conflict with religious doctrines arise. And when we talk about theocracy and its relevance to CSS and PMS exams, it is very important because theocracy is a concept which might not be asked directly, but we see that in political philosophy, especially in that of Machiavelli, when we talk about complete separation of religion and state, and in modern days context, when we talk about the political system of Turkey, when we talk about Iran, when we talk about China, even when we talk about Pakistan, the importance of theocracy increases. And I've given an example through which we can understand that, which says, how does theocracy influence governance and policy making in modern states, discussed with reference to at least one example. So basically you just need to have a great idea, great comprehension of what theocracy is, and then the rest you can do. So the second political ideology for today is secularism. And secularism in simple words means state without religion. And if we dig deep into its meaning, it is basically an idea that religion should be separate from government. It advocates for a clear distinction between religious institutions and the state. And the pictures that I've shared on screen explain this idea really well. And in a secular society, religious beliefs or practices do not influence the law or political decisions of the government. So we can understand it through an example that countries like France, India, and the United States have embraced secularism. In these countries, while religion may play a pivotal role in people's lives, but it doesn't dictate the country's law or political structure. And when we move forward, we understand that secularism is basically the separation of state and religion plus equal treatment. So secularism doesn't believe in any kind of distinction towards the citizens on the basis of religion that they have. And this image, this pictorial representation here represents or highlights the characteristics or key ideas of secularism, especially with reference to India. So in simple words, secularism is the separation of religion from the state. And what happens in secularism is when that often the majority comes into power, and due to this, tyranny can be seen. For example, in the context of India, you can see that even though India claims to be a secular state, but there's a rise of tyranny over there in the name of in the name of saffronization or in the name of their own religion. And at the same time, we see that in secularism, freedom of individual to exist from the religion is given to the people. So basically, this is an ideal form of secularism, which I'm talking about, where individuals have no kind of pressure to remain in their religion or to exit. So basically, religion is a very private thing in secularism. So that is not something that state dictates over. And then we talk about Indian secularism, where we see that one religious community does not dominate the other. We see in India, in India, we see that there are Muslim MPs as well, there are Christians as well, there are Dalits, there are all kinds of people from different caste, color, and creed. Even though I personally do not consider India a perfect secular state, but for the sake of understanding it, and since it is our neighboring state and we have much better examples and much better understanding of how the system works there, so I'm borrowing examples from India. And we see that some members do not dominate each other. So basically, the anchor of domination is not religion. In short, if I have to conclude what secularism is, so that this is what it means. State does not enforce any religion. The major idea of secularism is this, that the state will not enforce you to follow any certain religion. You can see this in Schengen states as well, in Europe. And also we see that state works to prevent domination. So secularism is a way to prevent domination of any certain class, caste, or creed, and it distinguishes itself from religion. So basically, what happens is that when a certain religion is being followed in a group, people try to distinguish themselves on the basis of their religion. So secularism tries to curb these actions. It tries to flourish a sentiment of equality and equity in society. And through secularism, we see that state follows a principle of non-interference into the personal lives of the people. The state is only required to fulfill your rights and duties as a citizen, or as a governing party. But other than that, it is not allowed to look into your matters of religion. At the same time, strategy of intervention is also not supported a lot in secularism. Yes, they do interfere in lives of the citizens if they see any kind of injustices being happening. But if I have to summarize the key features of secularism, I would simply say separation of religion and state, and it grants religious freedom, and it believes in non-discrimination. So if we talk about its relevance to CSS and PMS, we can see it from the context of the example that I've given. Critically analyze the challenges of implementing secularism in Pakistan's socio-political framework. How can the state maintain harmony between secular principles and religious values? So basically, this is a whole debate that, gets generated when we talk about Pakistan's history, political history, when we talk about the role of religion, because religion has been very important. But and in this context, the examiner might ask us questions that, what do you think about secularism in Pakistan? Can it work? Can it not work? Or if we want theocracy, what kind of balance is required in our society to make it a successful model of governance? So these are a few things that one must know. So basically, I believe if you know the definitions of these political ideologies well, you can mold your answers in a way that can convince the examiner through examples and proper citations. And this is a very important table, as I've also shared tables for my previous political ideologies, the political ideologies that I've taught in my previous videos. And this one is also very important. I've tried to, club those political ideologies that are often asked in comparison or in contrast. And when we talk about secularism, the idea of theocracy is something that comes in the mind of the examiner and the students automatically. So this table will help you understand the major differences and the contrast and the comparison between these two ideas, which is very easy to understand. And I would suggest that you either take a screenshot of it or you save it for future so that it can help you. So in the end, as I always say, that no political ideology is perfect. Each political system or country has an amalgamation or has a version of its own political ideology, which finds its roots or basis in the fundamentals of the political ideologies that we have studied. And it is very important to understand that you must approach theocracy and secularism with much care and with much consciousness, because these political ideologies are something that actually represent the true ideas of the candidates while they're attempting their exams. And one must have a very balanced approach towards these political ideologies. And one thing more, that while addressing theocracy and secularism, no speck of extremism must be seen in your answers. What is required is proper citations, proper case studies and examples to actually convince the to convince the examiner. And then I also have a question for you, that which system do you think fits well for Pakistan? And this was the video for today. And now we'll move forward with other topics of political science, especially with reference to CSS and PMS. The topic of political ideologies was only till here, and I think this much of idea of different political ideologies is enough, because you're not required to write your thesis or your PhD papers on it. You just need to have an idea and you need to create an opinion of your own. I hope it was very helpful. I would love to know your feedback in comments. Thank you.